Well, good afternoon. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us. Welcome to the Yale School of Management and our Spring Chubb Fellowship Lecture with our distinguished guest, Jill Ellis. We're thrilled to welcome her, U.S. Soccer Hall of Famer and the winningest head coach of the U.S. women's national team. Woo. So before we begin today's program, I ask that you turn off all your cell phones and refrain from taking any photographs during the program so that you do not disrupt today's program. So do that now. And now I would like to start our program with a land acknowledgement. Today's Chubb Fellowship event sits on traditional indigenous territories. This includes lands of the Mohican, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Shakatacoke, Golden Hill Pagosset, Niantic, Quinnipiac, and other Algonquin-speaking peoples. We honor and pay respect to their peoples of past and present. So my name is Mary Lui. I'm the professor in the Department of History and the program in American Studies here at Yale. I'm also the head of college for Timothy Dwight College. As the head of Timothy Dwight College, I have the honor of serving as the custodian of the illustrious Chubb Fellowship, established in 1941 out of a prior large donation for education purposes, made in 1936 by Hendon Chubb, a graduate of the Yale class of 1895. Since its establishment, the Chubb Fund has adhered to the goals of providing encouragement and aid to students interested in government and American public affairs. The fellowship initially aimed to foster among Yale undergraduates an interest in public service, in local and state affairs, and it grew over the years to include numerous distinguished visitors in national and international affairs, as well as leaders in the world of the arts and humanities and sports. Since the 1940s, the Chubb Fellowship Lecture Series has inspired generations of Yale students to undertake public service and pursue leadership roles in the hopes of creating a better world today and for posterity. The fellowship has hosted 4 U.S. presidents: Harry Truman, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, and George H.W. Bush. And in recent years, we have welcomed a wide range of national and international leaders, including visual artist Faith Ringgold, environmental activist Bill McKibben, Olympic figure skater Michelle Kwan, Grammy winner and violin virtuoso Hilary Hahn, award-winning news anchor and author Anderson Cooper. So with this quick description of the history and aims of the Chubb Fellowship, I'm delighted that we're welcoming to Yale today Jill Ellis as our Spring 2024 Chubb Fellow. I'm so pleased that we're joined today by many distinguished guests, including Ms. Ellis's partner, Betsy Stevenson. Where did Betsy go? There you are. Okay. We lost her for a moment. And of course, coaches and members of the Yale women's varsity soccer team, our Yale women's club soccer teams, and more. I'm also delighted that we have Vicki Chun, our wonderful director of athletics, with us. Vicki Chun began her position in July 2018 after an extraordinarily successful tenure as a student athlete, coach, and vice president and director of athletics at Colgate University. I'm thrilled to say that she is the first woman and first Asian American to serve in this very important role at Yale. And Director Chun has been an indispensable partner in these last 4 years as the TD community patiently waited out the pandemic to bring Jill Ellis to campus. We had originally named Ms. Ellis as our Spring 2020 Chubb Fellow, but just weeks before the event, the university, along with the rest of the nation, shut down completely. And for a moment, we thought maybe we had hope in bringing her, because those of you who are here might remember the university was initially only going to be shut down until April 5th. And I believe you might remember that. We had thought, oh, what is this pandemic? Just a few weeks and we'll be done. So we actually waited and waited to the very last minute to call this event because we knew how popular it was among our students and faculty. So sadly, we did have to call it off, and it's been 4 years, but we're so thrilled that it's finally happening, and very much the thanks goes to Director Chun's unwavering partnership. We are thrilled to have Jill Ellis here today. So right now, please join me in welcoming Director Vicki Chun to the podium. She will be introducing our distinguished Chubb Fellow, Jill Ellis.
What an honor to introduce Jill Ellis to all of you today. As you read Jill's bio, you will see Jill is in what I like to call the first club. One example is she is the first manager to win 2 Women's World Cup titles in history. It is apropos that Jill is being honored during Dean Liu's leadership of Timothy Dwight College. Dean Liu is also in the first club, first Asian American female to serve as head of a Yale residential college. I have known Jill and her wife Betsy and daughter Lily for over 20 years in many capacities: colleague, friend, and fan. Betsy, too, is quite a legend in college athletics and higher education. It has been a thrill to observe Jill make history year after year, weathering all kinds of victories and losses. Jill's accomplishments as a player, a coach, an administrator, and advocate is very impressive. What is most impressive to me is how she leads and the relationship she forms. Many moons ago, I served on the NCAA Division I Women's College Committee. And Jill was the head women's soccer coach at UCLA. Her team was in the College Cup many times, and in that College Cup, I was assigned to the Student Athlete Media Day. Jill's players were the only ones that recognized and thanked Jill for being an awesome coach to them. In my years on the committee, Jill's team was still the only one that recognized and thanked her for her incredible, selfless leadership on Media Day. That was so impressive for me. Timothy Dwight College and Yale Athletics both strive for excellence and making the world a better place. Jill, as a distinguished Chubb Fellow, is an example of someone who is doing just that. Go Bulldogs, go Jill, go Timothy Dwight. And before we bring Jill up, we have a great video for you to wrap up her illustrious career.
Jill Ellis, the most successful coach in women's soccer history, led the U.S. women's national team to unprecedented success. After winning the 2015 World Cup,
the U.S. wins the 2015 Women's World Cup.
She became the only coach in modern times to win consecutive World Cups when her team captured the 2019 World Cup in France.
Brilliant goal! Rose Lavelle won the World Cup for the United States.
From the success in 2015 to the disappointment in Rio the following year,
it's the hardest moments that are going to give us the most answers.
Ellis rebuilt, engineering a team that embodied the American spirit, a gifted and exciting team that pushed to the limits, all while raising the profile of the sport globally. Ellis fostered a generation of women who would have taken a stand regardless of who was listening. Her influence is bigger than football.
It's a good message, and staying true to your dreams and getting after it.
The winner is Jill Ellis.
You're the best.
I think every little girl that watched last night believes that they can do this.
Everyone, Wonder Woman herself, Jill Ellis.
We should just take, oh, it is working. Wow, this is amazing. School of Management. So, wow, watching that, did you all get chills? Probably all kinds of memories came flooding back. How many of you grew up watching these World Cup games and cheering? Yeah, I would think so. These were just such amazing parts, I think, of our experience living in this country, watching women's soccer grow, and then being part of the excitement and the journey. So thank you so much for giving that to all of us.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure. Yes, thrilled and delighted. I know this has been a long time coming, so thank you for, for your patience. But, truly, truly honored to be here. I'm not going to lie, when I got the first call, I'm like, Googling this, what is this? And I was like, wow, that is amazing. So I'm super, super honored to be here and humbled by this honor. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm sure it's easy for us watching that to think Jill Ellis was always going to be Jill Ellis, but I'm guessing that wasn't necessarily the case. So if you don't mind, let's bring you back to your childhood in the sense that it's clear, I know from everything we've read, you loved soccer, you come from a soccer family, a football family.
Football family, yes.
Football family. Can you say a little bit more about that? How those early years really influenced you and set you on this path?
Yeah, for sure. So I probably can tell from this accent I didn't grow up in Alabama. But I grew up in the southern part of the UK in a little, my town was called, village was called Cowplain, but grew up near Portsmouth. Loved sport, had no opportunities to play because at the time there weren't girls teams, there weren't women's teams, there was nobody coaching, so everything was on the men's side. But my father had been coaching, my brother played, and I just knew I loved this sport. But it was really just as a fan. I had no formal opportunity to play other than in the backyard with my brother, which usually ended up in a fight. So it wasn't until we moved to the U.S. that I actually, at 15, tried out for a club team. And that was my first time. I remember and I was a really shy kid, the only jersey number that was left on the roster was number 1. And so I was mortified that if I made this team, I was going to be number 1. But I made the team, and I remember just that night just staring at my jersey because I'd never been a part of a soccer team before. So it really coming here gave me an opportunity to not just play the sport I love, but also kind of set me on my path to where I am today.
And what was your position when you joined the team?
They asked me what position I played because I'd never really played before on a team. I said, I'll play anywhere. But they put me as a left winger, and I'm naturally a right-footed player, but I didn't even know any better. So I played with my left foot and my club team. We ended up winning nationals my senior in high school, and then I was recruited for college. But I was a really good field hockey player, but soccer was just the sport I just loved.
So you had to go from using your hands to only using your feet.
Correct, yep. Yeah. And no stick, but it was okay.
No stick.
I was a pretty tough player, so it was good.
Yeah, so at that point, did you think you were going to make it onto the team? I mean, clearly you played a lot with your brothers. Did you have a sense of how good you were?
No, I knew I was a decent athlete growing up in the UK. I'd played volleyball. We had this sport called netball. So I played a lot of sports. I ran the 800 meters. So I was really into athletics, but I had really no gauge. And when my father was brought over to the U.S., so my father was in the military, he was in the Royal Marines, and left the military, came to the U.S., took a job, and it was literally he ran summer camps. And so I would stand in line with the 6, 7, 8-year-olds just working on my technique because any chance I could get to kick a ball, I would. So I really just kind of committed myself, even though I was a late starter, to just growing in the game technically. And then fairly quickly, I realized when I started to get recruited in college that I must be okay. So I was pretty lucky, but was fortunate.
So growing up, did you have anyone you looked up to in terms of athletes, female athletes, male athletes?
Not so many female athletes because, again, at the time, there weren't role models. I really was into track and field, so a lot of my role models at the time were male athletes. The only time I sort of looked at, in the females was, when there was an Olympics and you had the likes of Mary Lui and you just had these incredible female athletes on world stages doing remarkable things. But in terms of someone that I would watch, I was a young Man United fan at the age of 7, so all my heroes were English footballers at the time. And then gradually, when I came to this country, I started to be around and be privileged to see, world-class athletes on the female side. April Heinrichs, Michelle Akers, Mia Hamm, these players later on that became global icons.
Yeah, at the time, did you think there could be a career in women's soccer as you were going through? So you were seeing the possibilities. You joined a team.
Yep. There's
college, can play in college. Did you have a sense that there would be beyond college?
No, I really didn't. There weren't very many college teams back then. And then in terms of female coaches, I think there was one at the time. So it really, sport had always just been a vehicle for me to get my education. I ended up going to William & Mary, played there for 4 years, and sport literally was a gift because at the time William & Mary didn't have scholarships. My senior year in college, William & Mary got scholarships, and forever indebted because my head coach at the time, he could have used that money to recruit freshmen. But there were 3 seniors on the team, myself and Julie Shackford and Megan McCarthy. And the 3 of us were all Americans, and he gave us the scholarship, and it was $5,000 a year to go to. It was $5,000. And I remember calling my mom because my dad at the time made $15,000 a year. So I called her and I said, Mom, you're not going to believe this. Because again, my mom was dead set on me just getting my education and making my path elsewhere. And I remember calling her and saying, oh my gosh, I got this. I remember her just crying because it was such a massive difference, in terms of what we were afforded. And it was the first time that I was like, wow, this actually could be something that if I could follow my passion. But I went to graduate school just really to get a degree, I was a graduate assistant, but I never dreamed, and I never thought I'd be in college. And in truth, when I was in high school and people would say, what does your father do? I'd be like, he's a coach, because, everyone was a banker, an attorney, and a doctor, and coaching was not even a profession that I think was, especially in soccer, there weren't really many soccer coaches. So I never really ever thought it would be a career path for me. There wasn't anybody to really follow or, go have open opportunities for me until April Heinrichs took the job at Maryland.
And you've told this story a couple of times today,
Yep.
so I hope you don't mind sharing it with the audience, because not everyone was around earlier today when we had these lovely chats with soccer players all across the university. What was that like? So you should say what you were doing at the time.
I was getting my master's in technical communication, and so I took a job with Northern Telecom in the Triangle I was down in Cary, North Carolina, and I was doing all right for myself. I was the lead writer in my group, and I was, at the time I was making like 45, 50 grand a year, and I bought myself a little car, and my former assistant coach at William & Mary had taken the head job at the University of Maryland. And she called me and she said, Jill, I've got this second assistant position open. I'd really like you to come and be my assistant coach. And I said, okay. And she said, it's $6,000 a year. So I was like, whew. So my mother, I shared this earlier today, my mother, Scottish woman, hard, tough woman, I called her and she goes, are you fucking crazy, right? And my father, who's, the dreamer, and he's like, coach, and he's like, oh, wow, that's amazing, kind of like, so there was these two, and, unfortunately, I'm probably more wired a little bit more like my father, and I ended up, I quit my job, and I like to say I chose passion over a paycheck, left my job, moved to Maryland, cleaned houses, coached club soccer to kind of, make things work. But, as I said to the players today, I knew within 2 months on the job that this is where I was meant to be, that coaching was just, it was just magical. I just loved everything about it. And, you know, as my father said, when you find that, it's not going to be work. And so it really was the first opportunity for me to find something that truly lit me up. I mean, you know, later on, my mom was like, yeah, I couldn't really see you behind a desk every day, so it worked out. And later on, she kind of got on board. In fact, when I came to this country and I told my mom, I went home and I said, Mom, I'm going to go out for the high school soccer team. She's like, oh my God, you know, she was just, because again, it was not ladylike to play football. And I remember the first game in high school, my mom, I'm like, who's that? I'm like, I hear this woman hurling abuse at the referee. I'm like, that's my mother. She's going to be just fine. So she got on board pretty quick and supported me.
In a thick Scottish accent?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yep.
So when you started as an assistant coach, did you have the sense that there would be a career, or you still were not sure what the career path would look like at that point? I'm curious what U.S. women's soccer looked like in that moment. We're talking about the 90s?
Yeah, so yes, I would say I joined April in probably early 90s. Mm-hmm. The 91 World Cup had just happened, and the U.S. won, but nobody knew because it was held in China, and there was no publicity, and it was just such a different time. So, no, I knew it was what I was going to do, and I would find a way. But in terms of even, being a head coach in a university or college, I still, there was so few opportunities. And, at the time, to be fairness, once women's soccer came on the scene, a lot of the coaches on the men's side, they went into that, now it was a job and there was salaries. So now you're not just competing. There was hardly any women. Now you're competing against the guys that have come over from the men's side too. So there was really, I would honestly say when I was going through that, working for April, there's probably only 2 other female head coaches in the entire country. So it wasn't something that I was dead set on, but I knew it was something that was going to be a part of my life moving forward. And, I was at the University of Maryland. April took the job at University of Virginia. I went there. And it really was, at that time, I didn't really consider a head job. And then I remember one day my father said, hey, this person from the University of Illinois is called. They're starting a women's soccer program. And I literally, forgive me, I had to see where Illinois was. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty far. And so I went out for an interview. And that was the first time that I really thought that this would be my opportunity to go and be a head coach somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And at that point, did you feel very ready to be a head coach?
I did. I mean, I'd been an assistant for April for 3.5 years. So I felt ready. And listen, it's one thing from going in and taking over a team, but to start a team is very different. It actually served me well later on in life when I started the San Diego Wave. But yeah, I literally had the club team. I had the club team come out for tryouts. I was hired in April. We had to put a team to compete in the Big Ten in August. So it was kind of, a lot of elbows and what to try and get this done. But I still remember fondly that first team that I had because, listen, at the time I was also coaching the under-21 national team, so I was coaching a little bit of international football as well. And I remember going in and working with my rec team, the club team, and I think they were probably just traumatized at the thought of this, this coach who's coaching internationally is coming in. And I just remember meeting with them and said to them, listen, I won't lower my standards, but I'm going to be super helpful and patient to get you there. And we kind of built this program, and they're obviously a strong program now, but it was really a perfect match for me and where I was in my growth as a coach to work with these players that were truly playing just for passion because there wasn't scholarships. They were playing for just the love of the game. So it was a great match, I think.
So did you always have this sort of dual track or parallel tracks of working with the national, international circuit and the university coaching?
Yes, because mainly April. So April was probably my mentor at the time. April was involved. April was the captain of the U.S. women's national team in 1991 that won the first World Cup. Incredible pedigree. And so she was working with U.S. soccer. So I was able to take the youth national teams at the time. And, I'll be candid. I mean, I love the college game, but international soccer was, because it was just so different, you're playing against Japan one day and Germany the next, and every single game was so different. and the style of play was so different that I really enjoyed it because it just really scratched my brain in terms of preparation and getting ready for the opponent. That I knew that was deep down kind of something that really, I like to say I found it just absolutely intoxicating being with the international game. Mm-hmm. But I knew that college was probably the more stable career path at the time.
And then eventually you made your way to UCLA.
I did. I did. I realized that Illinois was pretty dang cold every year, and so one of my players who I coached on the under-21s was playing at UCLA, and she said, we've got a job open, you should apply for it. I'd never been to California. I'm like, yeah, what the hell? So I applied for this job. I think I was actually their third choice, but I always buy the guy a beer whenever I see him who turned the job down. So he was the Duke coach. He turned the job down. They offered me the job. I took it, and it was, I think arguably it was really what allowed me to hone my craft as a coach, because I was working with tremendous level players. At the time, there wasn't a whole lot of expectation, but in my second season, we went to the national final, and then from that point on, there was, just a lot of expectation and desire to really kind of grow as a coach, but also grow this program into a national power.
And so at what point were you getting more involved with the national team to the point where it was clear you were moving on to the World Cup world?
Well, I was an assistant coach in 2008 in Beijing for the Olympic team, and then with Pia Sundhage, she asked me, and at the time she sort of said, "Why don't you come be my assistant full time?" But again, the stability and the thought of, wow, I just kind of got started at UCLA, so I did both. I almost had for 4 years I had two jobs, and then I was the assistant for the London Olympics, and I knew at that point that this is really where I kind of want to be at some point, because it was, again, I think there's nothing like being on that international stage. And I left UCLA after 12 seasons and went into U.S. soccer to oversee their youth development of the youth national teams. And then it was at that point that they fired the head coach. This was in 2014. And I remember the president of U.S. soccer said, we'd like you to apply for the job. And I paused and I thought, well, because I almost knew too much. I'd been involved in it a lot, and I knew the demands and the rigor and the expectations. But I was, as I applied for the job, I said this earlier today, as I started to apply and put my presentation together, I'm like, man, I really want this job, and kind of jumped in and was fortunate to get it.
And what do you think was the biggest challenge when you first joined the team as the head coach?
Well, when you've been an assistant, and it's like anything, right? When you take over and you've been an assistant and now you're the head coach, being an assistant is a lovely job. I recommend it for everybody, because, you're not making all the hard decisions. The players love you. It's, you're not really that person that the buck stops with. But I knew going in to be the head coach, it was going to be obviously and the reason was it was 16 years since we'd won a World Cup. So there was this absolute pressure and need for us to step in, and the World Cup was in 2015. I was hired in 2014. I knew immediately that it was the bar is very high. The national team is a prolific program. You don't go into that blind and naive to think that, unless you win a gold medal, you're going to have job security. So, I knew pretty quickly that I had to get this team. And I shared this today. My very first meeting with the team, it was this idea of, how do we get these players that are already so very successful and have won a lot and have been immensely successful on the world stage? How do we set them up to now be hungry and willing to work to be even better, to go win the World Cup? And my first meeting with them, I put up the quote, "Even if you're on the right track, if you sit there, you get run over." And it was really a message to them that where we are today is not good enough to win. We have to, it doesn't matter how many medals you have and how many goals you've scored. We need to commit to, I like to say, being one day better. And so then it was there really setting forth a path to how were we in 9 months going to close the gap and ready ourselves to be able to go and win our first World Cup in 16 years in 2015. But it was, I think I hired great coaches. I took an approach of how do we go from good to great, essentially? What does that look like? And it was really this idea, and I shared this with the team today, that if you try and if you're already the best at something, and they were ranked number one in the world, how do you make something better that's already very successful? And I took this approach that I'd read about in British cycling. It was called the aggregation of marginal gains. And it was this guy took over British cycling, and he looked at every single thing that affected performance. And he said, realistically, we're not going to get 50% better if we're already the best in the world, but how can we look at every single thing and make it 1% better? And then the aggregate of that will bounce us on. And that was really the approach I took when I took over. I looked at our staffing, our personnel, our tactics, our everything from our nutrition to our schedule, and said if we can incrementally improve that by 1%, the aggregate of that will push us forward. And listen, 2015 was tough. I mean, we started the tournament very slow, but I think we took a slightly different path than previous coaches, and it ended up paying off.
What's that path?
Well, it was the idea. In fact, I'll share this quick story. So, in November and December of a calendar year, it's typically the time when the players have downtime. And I said to my staff, you know what? Now, bear in mind the World Cup was in June, and now we're in December. And I said, let's take a different path. So I told the players, we're going to Brazil for a tournament. And they're looking at me sideways, like, really? This is our downtime. And I said to them, I was like, listen, if we're going to want to come have a different result, we've got to do some things differently. So I went to Brazil, and my purpose for taking them to Brazil in essentially our off season was to challenge them and make it hard, because I'm a firm believer when it's, success doesn't teach you a whole lot, but when it's hard and you struggle is when you get exposed and you can really kind of layer in, how do we now move forward from that? I took them down there. We got booed by 18,000 fans. We lost the game. We had practices were rained out, the stadium, like everything that possibly logistically could go wrong on this trip went wrong.
And you orchestrated that.
Clearly. So I brought the players in, because by the end of the meeting, by the end of the trip, they're looking at you sideways, like, really? This is our new coach? Holy crap, right? And I brought them in and I said, listen, here's what I know, is that when we go into a World Cup, into the pressure cooker, there's going to be a lot of adversity. But the more we can, I said, but based on how you've managed this trip, when we get thrown a curveball in that pressure cooker, we're going to hit it out of the park. Because it's not until you struggle that you really learn your weaknesses. It's not until you struggle that you really learn how resilient you are. So we went down there and we struggled. Oh, but it gets better. So after that, and we lost a game, and of course everyone's like, why did we hire her? We've lost a game. And this team just doesn't lose. So then I took them to France in the January. So I let them off December. We go. Now France, we go in January, which is now our preseason. So we're not that fit. We're working in towards our fitness. We go and we play France. In France, we absolutely get our asses handed to us. We lose 2-0. Now, true story. So we lose 2-0, and my cell phone rings, and it's the president of U.S. Soccer. And I'm like, oh, shit, I'm not answering that. I put that down. True story. I'm in my hotel room. The phone rings. I'm like, oh, my God, he's trying. I knew it was him. I didn't answer the phone. Swear to God, 5 minutes later, knock at my door. I'm like, he can't be here. But a note comes under my door, and sure enough, it's Mr. Sunil Gulati. And the note read, because now people are just clamoring, we've made the wrong choice, the wrong hiring, there's all the noise. And his note just said, we know you're doing it differently. We know it's going to work out. And I'm like, but here was the best part of it. Abby Wambach, who was my captain at the time, iconic player, she was starting to get questions from the media. Do you think you guys have got the right coach for this? I mean, the World Cup is 6 months away and you're losing games. And this is what she said. She said, well, if we do it the same way we've done it, we'll probably expect the same result. So I'm gonna believe in this process. And it was obviously, for me, it was like a huge endorsement. But it really was that different approach that made it hard, that made us struggle, that when we got into the World Cup, there the external pressure is huge, but we were able to reduce the internal pressure because we've been through these things. And we went into that environment, and sure enough, we started the tournament very slow. But I kept saying, as a coach, you find every pitch, right? And I said, well, we don't want to play our best football in the early part of the tournament. We're going to grow into this tournament. And sure enough, we ended up winning it. But it was just a very different approach. But yeah, there's a lot of noise, and there's a lot of young leaders in here. When that noise is loud, that's where you really have to kind of, believe in what you believe. And have that kind of, I'd say, naive resilience that you just believe in what you're trying to do. it worked out.
So how were you able to continue to motivate the team through
that?
Yeah, through all this adversity.
It's a great. I mean, I had a meeting. I think there's nothing better than as a leader sitting down and just having that one-on-one. And I said to them, I said, listen, this is not. I literally said to them, I was like, this is not the final exam. This is the test. It's just like being a student. When you find out where your weak spots are and you find out where your vulnerabilities are, then I said, we now have 5 months to strengthen those. So there will be no surprises. And so it was just really, again, I think if you exhibit confidence and you exhibit belief, and we had a plan. It wasn't that, I took them to Brazil purposely. I took them to France purposely. So it wasn't just these random things. And I think that they just, listen, I think part of it was like they were so desperate to win, they would have bought in. But the reality was that they did. They bought in and they believed. And I remember the first game, we ended up winning 3-1, but it was a struggle. And I said to them, I was like, every single game we're going to have to, fight like hell. But you've shown me that you have that in your locker. You've shown me that you have that resilience. Because this is a team that literally, in 5.5 years, I lost 7 games. And this team just doesn't lose. And so when it struggles, it's the sky is falling, the media jump on you, the fans jump on you, and there's even internal noise, right? Players that think that they should be starting, et cetera. So I think it's just how you manage the challenges of that and convey that confidence to the team.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is a question I definitely wanted to ask. How does one manage a team full of superstars? It must be so difficult to figure out who to play, when to play.
Right.
And I'm sure from what we can see as fans, these are not players, shall we say, quiet about their abilities.
Not dying violets, this crew, yeah, for
sure.
No, it's a great question. I get asked it a lot. And I think that, when you lead, I've always been, I think my players would always say, I'm truthfulness and empathy have kind of been how I've led, meaning I never candy coat. I'm always very upfront with the players. But I've always had as my guiding principle the team. Then you don't get caught up in relationships, you don't get caught up in egos. You always have to manage it with the team. So I think with the players, it was a situation where and I was talking to one of the younger players earlier, and I said to her, I was like, we hear nowadays a lot about being authentic. People have to be authentic to be. And I think back in the day, there wasn't that fancy word. So I would just said, if people can be as true to who they naturally are, and they live in their own skin, they will be, I think, able to perform at the highest level. So I never muted the extroverts. I never forced the introverts to be out front. But what I tried to do was treat these players with, show that you care. But I think what I tried to do was give them clarity in their roles and show them that they had value to the team. So even the player that didn't play a minute in the World Cup was as important to the player that played 90 minutes. Well, how do you show value to players? Well, part of what I tried to do was to even just change the moniker with which we talked about the team. So you have the starters and then you have the substitutes. Well, in 2014, we decided to call the substitutes game changers. Because they're not just going in to fill in, they're actually going in to make a difference. And we were showing value to them. And it didn't matter if, a player came off the bench, because it was really the whole messaging was every single player is going to have an impact on this team. And whether you play 90 minutes or you play 0 and you're at training, by showing value. Every time we had a match review, I wouldn't put up pictures of the starters, I'd put up pictures of the bench celebrating. So you create this synergy and you show value to all. And listen, does it hide all the warts? For sure not. These are very competitive women. They want to play every minute of every game. But I think that the secret of coaching is much like the secret of leadership. It's all how you manage people and how you build relationships, and you can have honest conversations. And sometimes they're not going to like the message they hear. But again, I think, I remember my dad always saying when I got into coaching, he's like, always know 50% are with you, 50% are against you. And so you go into coaching and you go into leadership knowing that you cannot please everybody. Mm-hmm. If you do, you will sell your soul. But you have to make sure you're taking care of the team needs. I always like to say you coach the team, but you manage the individual. And I think that way you can balance the idea of putting always at the forefront, the team is the most important thing. And then players, again, do they have their troubles and struggles? For sure, but it's how you express that, how you manage that, how you show value to them that I think helps you get through those tough moments.
Yeah, what do you say in terms of your career coaching the U.S. women's team? Were some of your toughest moments? 2016, I saw, was one moment.
For sure. So 2015, we win the gold medal. And again, success is not the best teacher. 2016, we go to Rio and we get knocked out in the group stage. It's the lowest finish, in the quarterfinals, lowest finish we've ever had in our program's history. And, fans have short memories, man. It's like you can win a World Cup and then like, you suck. And, it's just this is fans, right? That's why I love it. They're so passionate about it. But I remember in that moment of when we lost, I thought about this and I said, at the end of the day, what is failure? And when you boil it down, failure is two things. It's feedback and it's opportunity. And so what I recognized coming out of that epic failure was I knew what this team needed to build towards 19, because what I'd seen in the game against Sweden was a lesson in how a very good team can tactically eliminate our strengths so well. And so what it said to me was, here's the feedback. I have to diversify the profile of players I have on my team. I have to create a team now that's not just dependent on our strengths, but is also able to combat and take advantage of our opponent's strengths. So I knew I needed diversity in the profile of player. So for those that are not soccer people in here, you've got forwards that are going to run and gun, you've got defenders, but you also have players that are very technical, you have players that are very athletic, you have different profiles of players. And I said to the group earlier today, it's like when you go out and you play golf, wherever the ball lies, you want a club in your bag that you can play the shot. So whether you're in the sand trap, you're on the green, fairway. So I wanted to create a team. This was that regardless of what our opponent presented, we had a club in our bag to play against any team. So if they took away our space, we could play in very tight spaces. If they pressed us, we knew where the spaces were. So tactically, could we be more diverse? So here's the beauty of losing in 2016. I actually think it was the catalyst to our success in 19. But here was the hard moment is I met with my players and I said, okay, here's what we need. We need to increase our player depth and we need to diversify tactically. And I said, and to do that in 2017, it's going to be hard. We're going to not play always the best. Some of you might be on this ride. Some of you might be have a different role. We're going to play different tactics. It might not always be pretty, but guess what? Playing for your national team should not be easy. And all the players are like, yep, we get it. We understand. Said to my bosses, here's the deal. In 2017, I'm gonna shake things up a little bit. We're gonna play different styles. I'm gonna experiment with different lineups. Players are going to be uncertain. There's gonna be anxiety. It might always look good. Boss is like, yep, I get it. We got to do that. Even said to the media, you know what? This is what we're going into 2017. Well, guess what? It all sounds great. Everybody's with you. But when you're actually in it and you're losing games, that's when you really find out where you're at. And here was 2017, and I've shared this many times, was probably the hardest year I've ever had in coaching. So bring in different players, leave some players out. So for sure, I'm pissing off some of my players, right? And I said to my boss, I said, listen, they're going to call you and they're going to be frustrated, but just trust the process. I said, don't take the call. Takes the call. So now here's the steering wheel. I'm driving. All of a sudden, the steering wheel's gone because now he takes the call. Some of my players who had different roles, who were left out, were kind of just, because I mean, listen, to look at 40 new players, you have to leave some players off the roster. That's just the reality of it. So there became some internal noise. And I remember my president flying in June of 2017. Now, bear in mind, we'd lost 2 games in June. And I remember the media. I would be sitting in front of the press conferences and the media would say, well, Jill, are you worried about losing your job? And I'd say, I'm not coaching to keep my job. I'm coaching in what I believe. And I do believe this is what we have to go through to come through on the backside. So it was a terrible year, a lot of criticism, a lot of heat. And then my boss flew out and he said, I'm going to meet with the players. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's the president. And at that moment, it wasn't my team anymore, right? Because as a leader, you kind of get undercut. And I said to him, I was like, that's fine. I said, but if you're going to talk to 2 or 3 players, I want you to talk to 28. because the 2 or 3 that were impacted, that were left off the roster, or who'd gone from being a starter to the bench, for sure. So give him his due. He talked to 28 players, realized that maybe this wasn't a big issue. This was a sort of a small issue. And here's the part about leadership. So he came in January of 2018. He stood in front of my players in my first team meeting, and he said, she's going to be on the sidelines in France. The rest of you need to figure it out. And at that point, I got the steering wheel back. And at that point, it would have been very easy for me to say to those 2 or 3 players, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. But as a leader sometimes, and again, if your guiding principle is doing what's best for the team, I made a decision that wasn't best for me as a coach. Because, yeah, do you think I wanted those players there? Not really. But what I knew was I had to make decisions that were best for the team. And these players, I think, could help us. So I met with these players, and I said, listen, here's the deal. I get it. You disappointed, frustrated. And that's the thing as a coach. You understand. I understood where they were. They were no longer starting. They weren't getting playing time. Their brand was being affected. Their salary was being affected. But I said to them, I said, listen, if you can put more into this environment than you're taking out, we can go do this, and I think we can win a world championship. If you can, I'm going to have to make a tough decision. And at that point, I remember one of them sort of looked over at me and she goes, we got this. And then we moved forward. Now, were my relationships the same with those players? No, because at the end of the day, I get it. I understand. I probably crushed them a little bit and their roles changed, and that was hard. But I knew that we had to go through this. And I will tell you that some of the players' comments after 2019 were, that was an incredibly stressful period, but had we not gone through it, we wouldn't have had Rose Lavelle on our team. We wouldn't have had Sammy Mewis on our team. We wouldn't have had, because without the change, without the disruption, you're not finding other players, and now you're not building this team. So, looking back, it was tough. It was tough on my family. It was tough on, I'm getting in the car, I'm driving my kid, and she's got some of her buddies in the back, and they're like, ooh, Miss Ellis, you sure get a lot of shade thrown on you. And I was like, well, I'm not, and here's the thing, right? I'm not on social media. Not because I don't know there's criticism. People would say, oh, you're not on social media because you're worried about the criticism? No, I'm not naive, but I don't really care what someone in their basement thinks about this team. I'm living it, I'm there, I'm making the decisions with more information than anybody else. That's when you kind of have to trust and internalize that sometimes you just got to go through it. And at the end of the day, and I shared this earlier with the men's team, my father said to me on the eve of me going into coaching, he said, you're not a coach until you've been fired. And I was like, holy crap, what a terrible thing to say. But his point was, don't coach because you want to keep your job, because you'll make different decisions. Coach in what you believe. And so that came full circle, that I could have probably made decisions different, but I don't think we come out as successful on the back end, because sometimes you need that noise and disruption to make change.
Mm-hmm. And now you are president of the San Diego Wave.
That's right. So
do you feel like the world of professional soccer is very different, similar? How do you see this in news today, I think, right? You have a new league.
We have a new league. Yeah, there's a new Division I league formed. So now we have 2, which we're the only country in the world with 2 Division I professional leagues, which, yeah, it's crazy. But listen, I think this is 2 things I think. I think, and I say this because there's players in here, I think it becomes harder and harder to be a coach. And here's why. I think when and we all know these people, Mike Krzyzewski and Bill Belichick, those were coaches at the time that, and what's interesting is what's happened lately, those were coaches in their prime that they could have gone into any environment and they would have been bigger than any owner and bigger than any player. Now with social media, with the players have more of the say, and it becomes a players and owners professional world. I mean, you hear all the time, right? Players don't like the coach is out. Because I think now the coach's role is becoming so hard because you're having to make decisions. And I liken it to this. I've talked to a lot of Fortune 500 companies. They're like, well, why did your players want me out? I said, imagine this. You walk into your office and you say, I'm going to take you to lunch, but I'm not taking you. Oh, by the way, I'm going to give you more money than this person. That's what coaching is. You're constantly picking people over other people. There's no other real career like it, that you're constantly doing that. And to do that, you're not going to be always popular. But that's where you kind of have to stay true. So I think a coach's job now is harder because there's such a bigger lens. And now we have things like, well, you put a player on the bench, it's retaliation. Right? There's all these different ways of, so I think for a coach, it becomes a lot harder. But I think the opportunities, which is the good part, the opportunities for players to play professionally, to make a living, to have more opportunities, that is what's been the absolute benefit of now where we are with professional sports for women. That, you can have people making a career, you can have people making over $1 million a year in sport. You have, our league, so our owner bought into our league in 2021. He paid $2 million for his franchise. 2 years later, the two newest teams paid $53 million. It just speaks to there is a rocket ship here that is women's sports. We see it with the college basketball. We see it WNBA. We see this trajectory and where it's heading. And I said to the guys team today, I said, I think we're getting to a point where it's not just gender about sports. It's now about excellence. People want to tune in and they want to watch Caitlin, the women's basketball player. They want to watch excellence. It doesn't matter if it's a female or a male anymore. And I think that's where we're trending with sport. You look at the Women's World Cup, 2 billion viewers tuned in to watch this. So I think that speaks volumes about where we're heading. And a big part of why I got into the San Diego Wave and why I started this club was because I really felt professional sports, women's soccer in our league, in our landscape, needed a level, more of a lens on it, and it needed up leveling in terms of environment, resources, all these types of things. So it's pretty cool time.
And the Wave has done tremendously. You haven't been there very long.
We've done all right. Yeah, we launched our team in 2021. And then in 2020, our first season, we were the first expansion team to ever make the playoffs. We set the record for attendance at 32,000 for the league. The league's been around for 11 years. In our second year, we won the league, which is, again, it's only 4 teams have won in the history of the league, so it's kind of unprecedented. But, it comes down to hiring good people and empowering them and maximizing what they can do. I think a leader's job is to provide support and resources for others to shine. I really believe that. And I was able to hire great people and help them and support them, and they've done incredible things.
So will you be defending? Or moving? What do you see as the future for
the Wave?
Yeah.
Well, we're going into our third year. We're trying to sign some big players, top secret. Listen, the women's league itself, it's expanded from 12 teams this coming season, 24. It'll be 14 teams. It's expanding to 16 teams in 2016. You've now got, the owner of the Cubs has a team, the owner of the Vikings has a team. So you're seeing this whole level of investment. So if I may share, like the owner of the San Diego Wave, I went out to Los Angeles to actually, he wanted to start a team and he wanted a consultant. So I said, sure, I'll go listen. And I listened to him speak about, I said, why women's football? Why women's soccer? And he said, it's going to be $1 billion industry and I want to get in on the basement. Now, he owned the Penguins. He's a billionaire. And I thought, And I said to him, I said, well, I don't want to just consult. I want to run the whole dang thing. And I could see his eyebrows kind of go, oh, my God. And I said to him, I didn't go to Wharton, but I know how to hire great people and build a culture and empower them. And I went home, and 2 days later, I got an email, and it said, that's a really bold ask. Here's a bold offer. Let's go do this. And again, it was completely out of my wheelhouse. I will say that winning World Cups is actually easy compared to being a CEO of a women's professional team. It's like nothing I've ever done before, but I've learned an immense amount. And I think for the Wave, it wants to be, the flagship of the league. FIFA just announced that it's now having a FIFA Club Women's World Championship. So now in 2026, we'll have the opportunity to go and compete on the global stage because we want to be a global brand. So listen, I think where we're headed with women's sports in general is just, it's just a really exciting time.
Great. So I think this is a really wonderful place to stop. Okay, let's all join in thanking Jill for her time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
This was so wonderful. I'm so glad that you've been so incredibly generous with your time. She's been here all day basically meeting with one team after another. It's just been tremendous. So to show our appreciation, I'm going to introduce now TD sophomore Belle Golden, who is a member of the Yale women's soccer team, and she's here to present gifts on behalf of the team. Belle, you can go ahead and make your way up while I read your introduction. So Belle is from Manhattan, and she grew up playing in the world-class football club. At Yale, she is a winger. When she's not on the soccer pitch, she's an economics major. She also serves on the Yale Women's Athletic Council as the alumni liaison, connecting current varsity female athletes with our alumni. She's loved her time on the team and looks forward to another big growth season ahead. So, Belle, come on up. You there? Yep. Let's just make sure this is on. So, yeah. Okay. Is it on? Just tap it. There you go.
Hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, HL, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. As HL said, my name is Belle Golden. I'm a sophomore in Timothy Dwight Residential College, and I'm on the Yale women's soccer team. Ever since I was young, like every little girl who played sports throughout the 2000s, I looked up to the U.S. women's national team. The first World Cup that I truly remember was watching the 2011 World Cup. It was the finals against Japan, and as we all know, the U.S. lost. However, the U.S. remembered that feeling and came back with fire and grit. The next World Cups were 2015 and 2019. In both tournaments, I remember seeing Alex Morgan score beautiful goals with perfectly timed runs, Crystal Dunn defend with tenacity, and Tobin Heath, a winger and one of my personal favorite players, play with such creativity. The foundation of this beautiful system was Jill Ellis, who provided the platform that made these players shine. Even still, every time I watch the U.S. women's national team, I know every member of that team is playing with pride. Pride to be on the team, pride to wear the American crest, and pride to represent every little girl who dreams of potentially joining the team one day. Jill set this example that still lives on today. I remember the first time I put on that Yale jersey my freshman year. I felt the same sense of pride knowing I'm representing a program bigger than myself. Honestly, before our first game, I teared up in the team huddle, knowing how fortunate I was to be a part of a 45-year legacy that makes Yale women's soccer. Looking out at Reese Stadium in that moment, I knew with my teammates and coaches by my side, we could do almost anything on or off the field. Our head coach, Sarah Martinez, uses the phrase, "leave the jersey in a better place," to describe how we represent the teammates who came before us, while also laying the groundwork for the players that will come after us. The jersey doesn't stop being a part of you when you take it off. It is a part of every woman who has walked through Yale women's soccer. Jill, by creating a legacy of winning and excellence that brought such positive focus to women's soccer, and by extension, women's sports, you've left my jersey and every female soccer player's jersey in a better place. So, we are presenting you with the Yale women's soccer jersey.
It was so great. It was so beautiful. It was such a great job. Thank you.
A ball too.
A ball too. Woo! That's great. So we do, yeah, we have a photographer right there. Yeah, so, yeah, scooch this way. So we can be in the light. You want to be in the light. Come. Yes, there you go. Come on over. Yeah. So we can be in the light. Okay. Wow. Wait, so they should get a picture of just the team.
Oh.
Since